The afternoon sun filtered through the high windows of the Beverly Hills Hotel in 1967, casting long shadows across the private training room where two of the most famous fighters in the world stood facing each other. According to those who witnessed the encounter, Muhammad Ali had arrived 15 minutes early, his massive frame relaxed but alert, while Bruce Lee had been warming up for the past hour, his movements precise and controlled. The meeting had been arranged quietly, through mutual friends in the entertainment industry. Ali, at the peak of his boxing career, had heard about the young martial artist who was revolutionizing fight choreography in Hollywood. Lee, still building his reputation in America, had studied every available footage of the heavyweight champion, analyzing his footwork, his timing, his unprecedented speed for a man of his size. Those present that day recalled how the two men had circled each other initially, not with aggression, but with the mutual respect of masters recognizing mastery. Ali, standing at 6'3" and weighing over 210 pounds, towered over Lee, who stood 5'7" and weighed barely 140 pounds. The physical contrast was stark, almost absurd, yet something in the way they moved suggested a different kind of equality. According to witnesses, it was Ali who broke the tension with his characteristic humor. "So you're the guy who's been telling people he could beat me?" he had said, his voice carrying that familiar blend of challenge and charm. Lee's response, delivered with a slight smile, became legendary among those who heard it. "Not beat you, just hit you." The distinction mattered. It revealed an understanding of reality that both men shared beneath their public personas. What happened next, according to multiple accounts from those in the room, would be debated and mythologized for decades. Ali, intrigued by Lee's confidence, had supposedly said, "Show me. Try to hit me." He had raised his guard, not in his usual boxing stance, but in a casual, almost playful position. Those watching remembered how the air in the room seemed to change, how the playful atmosphere suddenly carried an edge of genuine curiosity. Lee had studied Ali's defensive movements obsessively. The boxing champion's ability to slip punches, to lean back just enough to avoid contact while remaining balanced for counterattack, was legendary. But Lee approached fighting from a different angle entirely. Where boxers operated within established patterns, Wing Chun and Lee's developing Jeet Kune Do philosophy emphasized the unexpected, the economical, the direct. According to the most credible accounts from that day, Lee didn't immediately attack. Instead, he began moving in a pattern that seemed almost dance-like, his weight shifting, his hands floating in positions that made no sense from a boxing perspective. Ali, those present recalled, had watched with genuine interest, his eyes tracking every movement. Then, without warning, Lee moved. The technique he used, witnesses later tried to describe, wasn't a punch in any traditional sense. It was more like a flicker, a sudden extension that seemed to bypass the normal mechanics of human movement. His hand, they said, appeared at Ali's chest before anyone fully registered he had moved. It wasn't a hard strike. Lee understood the difference between demonstration and assault, but it was unmistakably contact. Ali's reaction, according to those who saw it, became the most discussed aspect of the encounter. The champion didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't show surprise in any obvious way. Instead, witnesses recalled, his eyes widened slightly, and a slow grin spread across his face. "Do that again," he had said. Not a challenge, observers noted, but genuine fascination from one master witnessing something outside his experience. Lee obliged. This time those watching were prepared, trying to track the movement. Even with their full attention, they later admitted, the speed was difficult to follow. Lee's hand seemed to simply appear at different points, Ali's shoulder, his ribs, his forearm, each touch light but precise. It was a demonstration not of power but of possibility. What struck observers most was Ali's response to being touched so easily by a man half his size. Where others might have felt threatened or embarrassed, Ali appeared delighted. According to several accounts, he had laughed, not mockingly, but with genuine joy at witnessing something new. "How are you doing that?" he had asked, dropping his guard entirely. The next hour, those present remembered, transformed from potential confrontation into mutual exploration. Ali showed Lee the subtle upper body movements that made him nearly impossible to hit cleanly in the ring. The way he could move his head just inches, but create feet of distance in terms of targeting. The psychological aspect of making opponents miss, how it degraded their confidence with each failed attempt. Lee, in return, demonstrated principles that seemed to violate the established laws of combat sports. The concept of attacking and defending simultaneously. The use of sensitivity rather than sight to track an opponent's intentions. The way traditional techniques could be fragments and recombined in endless variations. According to witnesses, Ali absorbed these ideas with the same intensity he brought to his own training. One particular moment stood out in multiple accounts. Lee had asked Ali to throw a jab, not at full speed or power, but at what he called commitment speed, fast enough to be real. Ali complied, and those watching swore Lee's hand intercepted the jab and touched Ali's face in the same motion, a simultaneous defense and attack that challenged conventional understanding of timing. "In boxing," Ali had said, according to those present, "we think in sequences: jab, cross, hook, defense, then offense." Lee's response reportedly was, "Why separate them? Why not make them one thing?" This philosophical difference, witnesses recalled, sparked a discussion that continued long after the physical demonstrations ended. The encounter revealed something profound about both men. Ali, despite his public persona of supreme confidence, showed the humility of true mastery, the willingness to acknowledge and learn from a different approach. Lee, often portrayed as supremely confident in his abilities, showed the wisdom to respect the reality of size, reach, and specialized skill. He never claimed he could beat Ali in a boxing match, those present emphasized. His point was more subtle, that fighting itself was broader than any single rule set. As the afternoon wore on, observers recalled, the two men had moved from demonstration to discussion. Ali spoke about the mental aspect of fighting, how he won many fights before entering the ring through psychological warfare. Lee discussed his philosophy of adaptability, of being like water, formless and capable of taking any shape necessary. One witness, a stunt coordinator who had worked with both men, later reflected on what made that meeting significant. It wasn't about who was the better fighter, a question that missed the point entirely. It was about two men at the peak of their respective arts, recognizing that mastery came in many forms. Ali's boxing was perfect for what boxing demanded. Lee's martial arts were evolving toward something cinema and self-defense required. Neither was superior. Both were supreme within their contexts. The sparring, such as it was, never involved full contact or genuine competition. Both men, according to those present, understood that it would have been meaningless. Ali, operating under boxing rules, would have overwhelmed Lee through sheer size and specialized skill. Lee operating without restrictions might have landed strikes, but proving what? Instead, they had chosen exploration over ego, learning over competition. Word of the meeting spread through Hollywood and the sports world, growing more exaggerated with each telling. Some versions had Lee knocking Ali down. Others had Ali dismissing Lee as too small to matter. Those who were actually present found these embellishments frustrating. The truth, they insisted, was both simpler and more profound. Two masters had met, recognized each other's mastery, and chosen to learn rather than clash. In later years, both men would speak respectfully of the encounter when asked. Ali, according to published interviews, would praise Lee's speed and innovation. Lee, in his writings, would analyze Ali's footwork and psychological tactics. Neither claimed superiority over the other. Both seemed to understand they had participated in something rare, a meeting of martial excellence without ego's interference. The technical details they exchanged that day influenced both men's later development. Those familiar with Ali's training noticed subtle changes in his defensive movements, small adaptations that might have come from Li's demonstrations. Students of Li's later work pointed to expanded footwork patterns that seemed to echo Ali's mobility principles. Whether these connections were real or imagined, they suggested the encounter's lasting impact. But beyond the technical exchange, witnesses emphasized, something more important had occurred. In an era of increasing division, two men from different backgrounds, practicing different arts, had met with open minds. They had chosen curiosity over conflict, respect over rivalry. The strongest man in boxing and the fastest man in martial arts had discovered that strength and speed were only part of the equation. The room in the Beverly Hills Hotel where they met no longer exists, renovated away in the decades since. But those who were present that afternoon carried something forward. The memory of two men secure enough in their abilities to appreciate abilities different from their own. They had seen how true masters behave when ego steps aside, and learning becomes possible. Years later, a photographer who had been present but forbidden from taking pictures reflected on what he had witnessed. "People always want to know who would have won in a real fight," he said. "They're missing the point. What I saw were two men who had already won over their own egos, their own need to prove superiority. They were there to learn, to appreciate, to expand their understanding. That's rarer than any championship." The exact words spoken that day varied in different accounts, but the essence remained consistent. When Ali had asked Li to hit him, he hadn't expected to be hit. His surprise came not from being struck, but from being unable to see it coming. His delight came from discovering that decades of boxing training hadn't prepared him for every possibility. His wisdom came from embracing that discovery rather than rejecting it. For Li, the encounter provided different revelations. Ali's ability to make his large frame move with such fluidity challenged Li's assumptions about size and speed. The psychological dimension of Ali's approach, winning through mental dominance as much as physical skill, influenced Li's later teachings about the totality of combat. According to his students, he would often reference lessons learned that day. The meeting between Muhammad Ali and Bruce Lee became more than just a curious footnote in sports history. It became a demonstration of how excellence recognizes excellence, how true confidence allows for vulnerability, how the greatest achievements come not from proving superiority, but from recognizing the infinite ways mastery can manifest. In that hotel room, for one afternoon, the boundaries between boxing and martial arts, between East and West, between different philosophies of combat, dissolved into something simpler. Two men, at the peak of human physical achievement, choosing to learn from each other.